The deputy sheriff tugged his cap low, the late afternoon sun glinting off his badge as he nailed a glaring red EVY tie-in notice to the door of the Maplewood Homeowners Association clubhouse. Each hammer strike rang out like a thunderclap across Lakeshore Drive, silencing the hum of cicadas in the humid August air of 2024. Margaret Hensley, the iron-fisted matriarch of the HOA, stood rooted to the pavement, her manicured hands clutching a sheaf of legal documents that had just been rendered meaningless. Her face, usually a mask of smug control, was now a portrait of disbelief, her lips trembling as the weight of defeat settled in. Behind her, four board members shifted uneasily, their whispers sharp with panic as they realized their reign was crumbling. Across the street, I leaned against my battered pickup, arms folded, a quiet satisfaction warming my chest. I'm Ethan Caldwell, a landscape designer from a city, and I was watching the woman who tried to snatch my family's lake house get her comeuppance. After 8 grueling months of her schemes, ultimatums, and relentless power plays, justice had arrived, swift and merciless, in the form of a court order that flipped her world upside down. Let me rewind to where this all began. In January 2024, I inherited my great-uncle's lakeside retreat after he passed at 89. The house, with its peeling pine siding and creaky docks stretching into Maplewood Lake, was a treasure chest of memories summers spent fishing, the smell of cedar and campfire smoke. I planned to spend my weekends restoring it, turning it into a quiet escape from my city life. The property sat on 3 acres of pristine lakefront, a secluded gem just beyond the Maplewood Subby VY Shounds manicured lawns, though you could glimpse the HOA's clubhouse through the pines. What I didn't know was that Margaret Hensley had been coveting my family's land for years, con VY, and said it was a forgotten parcel she could claim. I first met her in February, knee-deep in repairs on the dock, when she stormed up my gravel path like she owned the earth beneath it. Mid-50s, with flawless auburn hair and a smile as cold as lake ice, she wore a navy blazer emblazoned with a Maplewood HOA crest, strutting like it was a general's insignia. She introduced herself with syrupy charm, then dropped the act, laying out her demands with the precision of a prosecutor. My house, she declared, VY OLAT HOA standards. I owed 4 years of back dues due la $250 a month, and any repairs required her board's approval. I wiped sweat from my brow and stared at her, hammer still in hand. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my tone even, "this land isn't part of your HOA. My great-uncle bought it in 1958, before your subby VY Shound was even a blueprint." Her smile twitched, but she recovered fast, whipping out a binder stuffed with papers and spreading them across my toolbox like a war map. "Established precedent," she snapped, her voice dripping with rehearsed authority. "This property's been under our oversight for 15 years. Your great-uncle may have owned it once, but neglect and community standard apply now." She jabbed a polished nail at the documents. "Pay up, submit your plans, or we'll seize the property through legal action." I held her gaze, my pulse quickening, but I kept my cool. This wasn't her land to take. That night, I tore through my great-uncle's records, stored in a dusty trunk in the attic. The deed was ironclad. He'd bought 5 acres in 1958 from the original landowner, long before Maplewood existed. But as I pored over property surveys and cross-checked county records, I stumbled on a bombshell that sent a chill down my spine. The HOA's clubhouse, the polished hub where Margaret held court, was built on a 1-acre slice of my great-uncle's land. Somehow, during the Subby VY Shounds development in the 1970s, the parcel was never legally transferred. By every document I could find, Margaret's precious clubhouse sat on property I now owned. Armed with this revelation, I marched to the clubhouse on a chilly March evening, where Margaret and her board were doling out fines for unapproved mailboxes. She sat at the head of a long table, flanked by her loyal lieutenants, looking every bit the queen of her fiefdom. I set my great-uncle's deed and survey maps before her, watching her eyes narrow. "These are irrelevant," she scoffed, barely glancing at them. "Community development overrides ancient claims." That's when I slid the second set of documents across the table, surveys showing the clubhouse, squarely within my inherited land. The room went silent. Margaret's face drained of color as she studied the maps, her hands gripping the edges like a lifeline. Her board members leaned in, their smug expressions melting into dread. "According to these," I said, my voice steady but sharp, "your clubhouse is on my property. You've been running your HOA from land you don't own." Margaret's composure cracked. "This is absurd," she stammered, snatching up the papers. "The developer deeded us this land. We have permits, utilities, everything." I nodded, unfazed. "Sure, but the developer never owned this acre to give. It's mine now. I suggest you call your lawyer." The air in the room felt electric, charged with the dawning realization that their empire was built on sand. The next morning, I filed a quiet title action in county court to confirm my ownership of the clubhouse parcel. Within 3 weeks, a judge's ruling came down like a guillotine. The 1-acre lot, clubhouse included, was legally mine. I hand-delivered the court order and a 30-day vacate notice to Margaret and her board. Her reaction was volcanic. She called me, voice shrill, accusing me of fraud, threatening lawsuits, vowing to bury me in legal fees. But her attorney, after reviewing the EVICTED, was blunt: comply or lose everything. As the deadline loomed, Margaret's desperation grew. She offered to buy the land, then pleaded for a lease, even floated the idea of me joining the board like I'd ever align with her. Her tone had shifted from commanding to groveling, a stark contrast to the tyrant who tried to bully me months earlier. Meanwhile, her board began to fracture, whispering about her reckless leadership. How had she let the HOA operate on stolen land for decades? Property values, they fretted, would tank without their clubhouse. EVICTED arrived on August 15, 2024, with brutal efficiency. Deputies oversaw as board members hauled out desks, files, and coffee makers, loading them into a rented truck under the scorching sun. Margaret stood on the sidewalk, her once imposing presence reduced to a hollow shell, her eyes darting as neighbors gathered. Some watched with pity, but others those she'd fined for petty infractions like untrimmed hedge-gown hide their smirks. Her kingdom was gone, and I was the one who toppled it. But I wasn't done. The next day, I hired a crew to transform the clubhouse into something the community could actually use. We built a public dock with boat slips, a kayak launch, and turned the building into a shared space for Lake Gurno fees. No gatekeeping, just a place for neighbors to enjoy the water. The irony was delicious. Margaret's grab for my land had cost her the heart of her power. 2 weeks later, the HOA limped into a rented room at the town library for an emergency meeting. Margaret faced a no-confidence vote, and the room buzzed with resentment. One by one, residents stood, airing years of grievances or draconian rules, her vendettas, her obsession with control. The vote was a landslide, 52-9, ousting her. Her resignation letter, read aloud by a board member, was a bitter tirade, blaming everyone but herself. The local paper pounced, running a front-page story. HOA tyrant's land grab implodes. The photo of the EVICTED notice, still taped to the clubhouse door, was a final, humiliating blow. Margaret's downfall didn't end there. Her employer, a prominent real estate firm, quietly pushed her out after clients questioned her competence. By September, she'd sold her house and fled Maplewood, unable to face the neighbors she'd once lorded over. That evening, standing on my great uncle's dock as the lake glowed under a fiery sunset, I thought about how swiftly arrogance can unravel. Margaret had been so sure of her power, so certain she could bully her way to VY that she never checked if the ground beneath her was hers to stand on. The HOA served VY, but under new leadership a retired librarian named Clara Thompson who focused on community, not conquest. 6 months later, in February 2025, Clara approached me about using the old clubhouse for potlucks and lake cleanups. We struck a deal. They could book it, but the land stayed mine, and any future HOA would respect that line in the sand. Margaret's legacy wasn't the empire she dreamed of, but a warning etched in Maplewood's memory. overreach at your peril. Now, I want to hear from you. Was I too harsh, turning Margaret's world upside down? Or did she deserve every bit of her downfall? Should I have compromised, maybe, leased the land to save her pride, or was going full throttle the only way to stop a bully like her? And what about HOAs, though? They protect communities, or are they just breeding grounds for petty tyrants? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if you felt the rush of her defeat, and subscribe for more stories where justice hits hard.